this meeting of the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency to order. I believe, Mr. Solomon, you have something you want to say about the use of electronic transmission of this meeting.
This meeting is being broadcast and being held electronically via WebEx in compliance with Executive Order 16 issued by the governor of Tennessee. It is being recorded on YouTube, being preserved there for future reference to the public and anybody else. And the public has been given the opportunity to participate.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I think it goes without saying for each of us individually, together as a board and representatives of a city, that this is among the more important times in the life of our world. And that being said, Commissioner Coleman agreed that she might speak for a moment to our world and to us.
In the book of Jeremiah, the 6th chapter and the 14th verse, we find these words. They dress the wound of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace. As we are gathered in our important meeting, George Floyd, also known as Perry, is being funeralized. Before his tragic murder, assassination, whatever you wish to call it, he was not known throughout the world. But today, not only in these United States of America, but in countries across the world, there is a groundswell of support, particularly among the youth, but not only the youth, the seasoned or the seniors, the Black, the white, the rich, the poor, people of all political persuasions are crying out for justice, equality, inclusion, but most importantly, love for one another, as we are all created in the image and likeness of God. It is unfortunate that George Floyd is having an open casket, similar to the situation in 1955, the late summer, when Emmett Till was also savagely and brutally murdered, not by the police this time, but by vigilantes and people who did not accept the fact that we are all indeed created in the image and likeness of God. I was struck, and my history may not be correct, that in the 60s, when there were demonstrations and protests in Nashville, there was not any report of which I am aware of burnings and violence or things of that nature. But the times have changed, and many people are on a very, very short fuse. From 55 to 2020, we are still experiencing the same things, and patience has worn out. But I ask that each of us not only remember George Floyd, also known as Perry, but purpose in our hearts and our very being to do something creative, constructive, and even radical, so that the beloved community of which Martin Luther King spoke, can indeed be realized. And that is one of the reasons, as we're deliberating on development districts, I see the importance and the necessity to do things very, very differently with very, very different outcomes, so that we will begin to lessen the perceived and very, very real disparities among the communities in our cities. Let peace prevail on earth. Let change prevail on earth, and let it begin with each and every one of us. Thank you, Commissioner Chair Purcell.
Thank you, Commissioner Coleman. Thank you, very, very much.
Yeah, I believe, excuse me, Chair. So Ms. Coleman, you have obviously joined. Ms. Bowers, I believe, has joined as well. So the minutes reflect that. And is Commissioner Campbell, has he joined or not? All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes of the meeting of May the 12th?
I move the approval of the minutes from the May meeting of the MDHA Commission.
Motion's made. Thank you. Motion's made. Is there a second? Properly seconded by Commissioner Thaden. Is there any discussion, changes, corrections? Are you ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And you adopt. On agenda item number 3, which is introductions, we have 2 introductions today. And I believe they are with us. Ms. Lillian Maddox Whitehead, who is the president of the Vine Hill Apartments Resident Association, as well as Ms. Arlene Cummings, who is the property manager of the Vine Hill Apartments, are here by way of this teleconference, and we look forward to their report.
Right. So, is it okay for me to go ahead and speak? I'm sorry.
No, please. I wish you would. I'm sorry. You're right in front of us.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I'm Lillian Maddox Whitehead. I am the current president for the Vine Hill Homes. I was asked to come today to speak about some of the things, some of the initiatives that we plan to do in the Vine Hill community moving forward. And I know that we're in unprecedented times, and so we have to take into consideration social distancing and making sure that people are wearing the proper PPEs. But we plan to move forward in August, hopefully, to do the Nashville Night Out Against Crime. And I think that this time, with the civil unrest that we have going on in our city and across the country, it is important for us to show that the police department, they are our friends. And so we would like to move forward with having the Nashville Night Out Against Crime, and also with the Strong Families Initiative. I know that many HUD properties across the country have incorporated or implemented that into their communities. And so we plan to continue with those projects as well. I also serve in a different position. I am the director for tobacco prevention for the Metro Public Health Department. And so it is also a pleasure that we have been able, the presidents of the Resident Association with MDHA, we were able to meet with Mr. Jim Harbison in January to talk about the need for smoke-free housing. And so Mr. Harbison listened to us, and he came up with an eloquent idea, is that we know that tobacco is an addiction. And so in order to help these families to become smoke-free and to make our properties, kept more cleaner, we should be able to offer tobacco cessation classes as well as nicotine replacement therapy. So anyone who approaches, the social service coordinators or the managers of the different properties across the city that say that I'm a smoker and I really want to stop smoking, through this initiative that the presidents of the Resident Association established with Mr. Harbison and MDHA, they'll be able to get those nicotine replacement therapies. So I just really had to express how thankful I am that we're able to do that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
For everything you're doing for us there at Vine Hill, and obviously across the whole footprint of MDHA and also the city through your work with public health. That's very impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Maddox Whitehead?
I have a question, Paulette Coleman. So thank you very much for coming to us this morning, Ms. Maddox Whitehead. Your perspective as president of the Tenants Association, are there any recurring issues from the residents that need attention?
You know, one of the reoccurring issues that I've heard is that some people with this pandemic, during this pandemic, that the maintenance office has not been able to come in and fill those work requests. And we know that, you know, they were working staggering shifts. So being able to communicate with them that these shifts have been staggered and that those things will be addressed as soon as possible, that has, you know, eased many of the residents that I've spoken with. I try to walk around the community, go for walks. You know, one of the things that I would love to see moving forward is that, you know, we could do some sort of beautification contest, because I noticed that a lot of people in this community, they do take pride in where they live. And so that's something that, you know, has got me out just walking around and just surveying the community.
I don't know. Jim, you wish to comment?
First of all, Leland, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Our funding commitment's rock solid, and I appreciate your help because it is a smoke-free environment we're trying to create. And on the beautification, that's a great idea. I'll take that for action. So somebody's going to be reaching out and go down to Will Biggs and make sure we take that on. We'll probably pilot that at your place. I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Just as an explanation, we have placed all our maintenance workers, they work an 80-hour work week, and so that they are not exposed and we don't have contact, we've limited their contact with residents, preventing any potential hazard to them. They've also had the occupational health and safety training to provide the personal protective equipment. But our maintenance team have been split into two groups, and one group works Monday through Saturday of the first week of the 2-week period, and the other group comes in and works the following week, allowing really about half of the team to be not on site. So other, and we are paying them for the full 80 hours, but we're only getting about 48 hours. But that was our best solution, and we're hitting the emergent work requirements as best we can. But I know routine maintenance is slipping. I would ask you just be patient with us. We're probably going to continue with this till about mid-July, roughly, just for safety, and then we'll accelerating and catch up. But I've been out seeing the properties, and we haven't had any major declines yet, but it is something that we're going to address once the maintenance workers come back to full-time status. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I believe that Ms. Arlene Cummings, the property manager, is also on the phone, not available by video. Ms. Cummings? Do I see you there?
Actually speaking to you from my phone.
That's perfect. That's fine. We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. I heard Miss Lillian, and we are working as hard as we can to get our work orders done. As Mr. Harbison said earlier, we work on emergencies first, and then we get the rest of them. But we're trying to do the best we can with the number of people that are on staff at any given time.
Well, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Cummings? Well, we really appreciate all that you are doing individually and as leaders within a community that has been an important and critical part of Nashville for a long time and will be for a long time to come. So thank you very, very much. If you're ready, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is public comments. We have two individuals who have requested to speak. I understand that both of them will be speaking on behalf of their association, affiliation, and work with SEIU. We have William Curry and Timothy Burns. And I'm happy first to call on William Curry.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the commissioners and Director Harbison. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. I just want to take a couple minutes and talk about everyone on the board should have received, including Mr. Harbison, a email yesterday, which is a petition signed by the employees, and their concern is hazard pay. The employees feel that, they are essential employees, and I believe MDHA has deemed those maintenance staff and other employees essential employees. And so we have submitted a petition with 80 plus signatures of MDHA employees to talk about hazard pay. And they feel that they should receive hazard pay through these times because they are working, they are going in apartments and things of that nature. So I appreciate your time. I wish we could, if we could sit down via Zoom or teleconference and talk about this more. But the employees, they do need hazard pay, as all other metro agencies and departments are receiving hazard pay for essential employees as well.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. If you would stay on the line so that we could come back if necessary for questions and possible response from our executive director and the team here. Timothy Burns.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon to Mr. Harbison and the chair. I want to thank you all for allowing us to have a brief moment of your time. I am the Vice Chief Steward for the SCIU. The job that I do is to provide pest control for the entire agency. MDHA has deemed it that the employees are essential workers. In going in and out of the residence units, it is fearful that the residents are not taking COVID-19 serious. I fear for myself and my family. I do not want to bring COVID-19 home. Since my job requires me to enter units, I fear that compensation will be needed. The stress that we face should say it all. Please include the employees of MDHA hazard pay, just like Metro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you both. Are there questions at the moment, or would you, Mr. Harbison, would you like to respond?
Certainly. Well, I think as both William and Mr. Burns know, and Nat Cole, the shop steward, and I met roughly 10 days ago. It might have been 2 weeks. We agreed there. He gave me this issue along with a couple others, and I gave him 2 or 3 of ours, and we were supposed to meet to continue that discussion tomorrow. Sadly, he's had to reschedule. And when we meet again, we'll certainly take it under advisement and continue the discussion. As mentioned in the previous comment from a resident, maintenance workers, by and large, do not work, are paid 80 hours, but do not work the full 80 hours. They work 48 hours. They work 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, and then they have the following week off, intentionally to minimize exposure and contact. That's not true of all, but that's the vast majority. We also, as I think the board knows, recently completed a complete 100% testing of everyone in the agency. We had no positives. We're very concerned about this. Nothing is more important to me than the safety of our great team and workers. To that end, we have over half the agency on telework. And those areas where we really can't do it by telework, we're doing several positive concrete things. One, we're meeting all the OSHA standards, and there was new guidelines that came out this week. We have education going on that starting tomorrow. 2, all the personal protective equipment that's required and necessary has been provided and is supervised by the maintenance supervisors. 3, we've decreased the working hours, even though we've maintained full pay for them. So for an 80-hour pay period, most of our maintenance workers work 48 hours. That decreases their exposure. And as a result, we're only doing emergency work orders, with one exception. That's here at Casey, because we have so many units that need to be turned to make ready for occupancy. We are seeing some of the staff here working full time. So we believe we mitigated this risk as best we could within CDC guidelines with OSHA standards. We are researching hazard pay, which was first brought to our attention less than 2 weeks ago. We were scheduled to meet with the union tomorrow. Sadly, yesterday, they asked for that to be scheduled. That was Nat. I'm not sure the exact reasons, and we'll meet with him. Happy to when he's able to reschedule. So certainly an issue for us, and we'll keep studying it and working with our union.
So, Mr. Harbison, and just to sum up for the board, if I understand it correctly, the issue has been raised and brought to you by the representatives of SEIU. You are in the process of researching both the issue and I concluded by implication reviewing what is occurring in the balance of Metro and the existing public employee policies in this time for those employees, that the issue is to be discussed further with the union, and a recommendation at some point will be made and a decision made through that negotiation and discussion process.
Yes.
Are there any other questions? I think the matter is.
Yes, this is Paulette Coleman. I have a Mr. Curry and Mr. Burns. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We can't hear you we can't hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. I understand your concern about the hazardous duty pay, but could you help me understand how you balance being paid for 48 hours, I'm sorry, being paid for 80 hours, working 48 hours? Do you want the hazardous pay only on the 48 hours that you work, or what?
This is Timothy Burns. I work every day, 5 days a week. I'm not off anytime. I work 80 hours every 2 weeks.
Hello?
No, ma'am.
Okay. This
No, ma'am,
next
I don't.
question, I'm sorry,
No, I don't.
you, Mr. Curry. Hello, Mr. Curry?
Yes.
Do you?
I am employed with the Service Employees International Union. I am not an employee of MDHA.
Oh, okay, thank you. I got you.
I'm the representative of SEIU.
Okay, thank you very, very much. The next question is, aside from hazardous duty pay, what do you think MDHA should be doing to ensure the safety and well-being of its employees, as well, you would know more about the employees.
The employees have been provided with the proper PPE. My concern is that the residents are not taking it seriously. As we go in and out of units, we're wearing our mask and our gloves, and most times the residents are not.
I got you.
So that's my fear is if they can't, if they're not doing it, then we should be paid for going in and out of units that are hazardous to us.
Okay. Are you comfortable with the fact that Mr. Harbison and the other person are having discussions about that? And are you willing to wait the results of those discussions? Or do you have something that you want to see done immediately?
I would like to wait for Mr. Harbison and Mr. Nat Cole to discuss this. I do believe that there are a lot of areas that need to be discussed. So, I mean, we can wait, but I think a lot of things need to be ironed out so it will be better for everybody.
I really, really appreciate what you have said. And just for information, I am the daughter of a labor union activist. My father was a steel worker, so I have great empathy for you and for your cause. And I'm glad that you're willing to wait for the discussions between Mr. Harbison, and I'm sorry I didn't get the other man's name, and I'm sure they will take place suddenly. Thank you for the work and you do and the risk that you feel that you undertake in your job. All.
Thank you for listening.
And I'd like to ask one more follow-on question. This is Commissioner Ansari, to either the participants on the call. As part of your work with MDHA, were you allowed to essentially decline to do work orders if you felt like a resident, a household, or home, your observation is that they're not taking the measure seriously? Were you given an option that at your own judgment, if you felt like those conditions were unsatisfactory or unsafe, to decline the work call?
The job that I do, as I said earlier, I provide pest control for the whole agency. So it is my job to go in and out of every unit. I don't have the luxury of denying anything. That is my job. I have to provide service for the whole agency. So I don't have that luxury.
Okay, and so you're saying is that if you felt like that your health was being put into danger, you're saying you're either by contract, well, it sounds like by contract, that you feel like that the flexibility or leeway was given for you to say, I feel like I am being put in a dangerous position, and I therefore would prefer not to be in this dangerous position. You don't feel like you have the agency in your role to do that.
If I may respond, this is Mr. Curry. Again, like I don't think that the agency has put out a policy or a recommendation to the supervisors, put down to the staff, that those precautions should be taking place if an employee feels that their health will be jeopardized entering an apartment. So I don't think that there has been any directive put out there for those employees to follow those type of guidelines.
Got it. Understood.
So Commissioner, sorry, this is Jim. So we published an 8-page protocol, Will Biggs did now 7 weeks ago, on how to enter an apartment, how to communicate with the residents, how to ask them to leave if needed, what things to look out for. Additionally, every employee has an app on their phone. They log in every day. It's the same app that's used by Ascension Health. If there's any indication of a problem, that goes to a telemedicine, and then we direct them to a test. So there's a series of protocols that have been published down to the property levels. I believe they're down at the maintenance supervisors, the 4 or 5 maintenance supervisors ask about are aware of them. But in order to get work done, we have not provided the option for employees to pick and choose their tasks. And we leave that to maintenance supervisors to assign tasks, to assess risk, and within the protocol of entering an apartment and how they speak to the resident, how would they ask them if they have a mask, if they think they have an illness or have been exposed to COVID. Those things are in that protocol. I can get Will to, it's about an 8-page document, very extensive. We put out when we started this program back, whatever it was, about the same time we shut down or we went to visitors only at the towers. So it's a pretty extensive document. And if I've got Will Biggs on the call, Will, are you on? Somebody unmute Biggs Mr. Biggs if he's on.
I am here.
So Will, can you recap our call from your document? And we had this discussion, what the protocol guidance was to the property managers and maintenance supervisors from affordable housing. Can you recap that? I believe that was your document in conjunction with the maintenance supervisors.
It was my document. I can remember specifically that we suspended, I think it's about March 16th, we suspended non-emergency work orders in all of the locations for staff. We sent out a protocol that essentially gave them guidance to make sure they wore PPE when they did have to respond to a unit. They were to knock on the door, stand back 6 feet. When the resident answers, they were to inquire about anybody in the home that may be suffering from any illnesses. Assuming there was none, they would ask the residents to leave the room that they were working in until they finished their assignment, and then upon completing their assignment, they would notify the resident they were leaving. Upon exiting, they would disrobe, complete their work order, and just go about the rest of their day. So and that's it in a nutshell. I don't have all the specific guidance, but I gave them detailed steps about how we should approach this work activity in this new environment. And so Mr. Burns doesn't work directly in the affordable housing team, so maybe that information didn't filter to him, but I think we certainly shared it with everybody that has a maintenance role in the organization.
And just to follow up, Pat Thicklin, are you on? Can you go over the OSHA regulations that we were working through late last week, early this, and the training coming up for OSHA and what we've done previously with the OSHA standards? Pat, are you on?
While we're waiting for that discussion of OSHA to sort of bring some understanding to this particular set of discussions, it strikes me that there is an understanding about a protocol across the agency. There is an understanding that there'll be meetings between SEIU and not just the professional SEIU employees, but also employees of the agency, that they are scheduled for the next week, and that there's an opportunity to work through not only the questions they've raised, but any element of this communication and misunderstanding that may have existed, may or may not have existed in terms of the entire maintenance staff. My thought would be that that's an opportunity for the SEIU representatives as well to reassure themselves that the policy does indeed provide what is needed in terms of protection and information, and raise the issue if necessary. It gives us then an opportunity to have a report back at the next meeting on the outcomes of those discussions. And if SEIU or Mr. Curry or Mr. Burns has more they need to communicate with us, that would be a time, or as they indicated yesterday, they have the right and the ability to communicate with us as individual commissioners as well. With that having been said, is the board comfortable that we could leave it there and allow the negotiation to go forward? I appreciate in particular Ms. Coleman's contextualizing of not just this, but also a part of her life that I had not yet fully appreciated, but appreciate especially today. Thank you again to both Mr. William Curry and Timothy Burns, and please give our best as well to Nat Cole.
Thank you, sir.
The Executive Director's report.
Thank you. Since it was a topic last month, I'll hit just the highlights and a review of what we're doing for COVID-19, which continues to occupy a good deal of our time and effort. I think as the board knows, we had 100% testing of all employees. Everyone came up negative. We also had offered full testing for all residents, which went quite well despite some logistics issues that were associated with it. We tested just over 1,000 residents thus far, and we've had 4 positives that we're working with our social work staff to take care of them as they self-isolate. Additionally, we have OSHA training coming for all our employees, OSHA certification, and the COVID-19 safety protocols for maintenance supervisors. Our maintenance staff in general is on the 48-hour of 80-hour work week. We've split in 2. We do have a section that is in our construction team. We have our own internal construction company Mr. Burns is part of. Some of them are still working full time. 162 of our 322 employees are on telework and are not in the office. And we are continuing with National General to test across the agency every Friday and Saturday. We hit a different site. We'll continue that testing program for the indefinite future. And our towers, we continue our no COVID-19 in our tower program, where visitation is limited to those approved by the property manager, as well as contact with outside supportive services. Our COVID program thus far has been highly successful. We've had with the employees 2 positives total. We had none from the testing across the agency. And I think we've done everything within reason to continue operations and our continuity of operations program while protecting the residents and our employees. I gave a presentation to the Metro Budget and Finance Committee. That presentation was provided in your packet. Basically hit the highlights that we are not seeking operational funding and receive no funding from the Metro government, and used it as an information session to inform them of the opportunities that MDHA provides to the city and how we work to align our work with that of the administration and the council, with an eye to the future possible cooperation in improving affordable housing and remediating concentrated poverty. We have, in response to our approach for the envisioning program, we have energized a full-time equivalent, reprogrammed some funds, and moved a person into the role of the community quarterback and philanthropic outreach person. So we'll be going to systematic philanthropy in the local area. We already do great grant writing. We are continuing communication here at Casey with a variety of potential quarterbacks. Some we'll be meeting with this week. On insurance and FEMA reimbursement from the tornado, it looks like every penny will be recovered either through insurance and or philanthropy. We had great help and support from Pinnacle and other banks that helped pick up the cost. As you recall, we spent about just over $150,000 for food and hotel rooms for our residents that were impacted by the tornado. I mentioned it last time, but I want to give a great thanks to the Oprah Winfrey Foundation for over $2,200 Kroger gift cards to our residents, which was coming at a very needed time for many of our residents. And it's been a great advantage for them. We get a lot of positive comments on that, and certainly was very helpful for all. On affordable housing and our main bricks and sticks, so to speak, of our apartments, they've been very busy. At least, of course, Kirkpatrick Park and mixed income is fully leased. Mosley on 6th, just down the street from the headquarters, is now fully leased, as are the townhomes across the street. So we're now in our first 3 major phases of mixed income development. Both market rate, workforce, and affordable housing have leased up very nicely. On our development projects and on construction, of the 11 financed projects, all are on schedule, on budget. We have 7 in concept development. We're pending notification, we hope, of a 9% low-income housing tax credit award from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency that should come this month. We'll know if we receive funding or not. We're cautiously optimistic that we will. So development's on track, our leasing is on track, and I'll come to our major effort, and probably the one that's occupied the most time recently. We are in an unusual situation for our voucher program. I answered Commissioner Thaden's questions on this sometime last week. We are in a thing called the shortfall status with the HUD. And what that means is, as a result of recertification of many of our resident families who have vouchers who have lost their jobs, they've gone from paying a portion of the rent that represented 30% of their earned income. In many cases, that's $300 to about $500. Many of them have lost their jobs, and when they do, their rent decreases as a result, and they go to zero, what's called zero rent, and they pay $25. The difference is the federal budget then picks up that loss of tenant income, and when it's in a large number of residents, families, as it was here, it's over 800, that budget authority that we received originally from the feds does not cover our annual needs for this newfound cost of federal money for the vouchers. So essentially the vouchers, the tenants paid less money, the federal government pays more, it comes out of a fixed budget. That means we don't have enough money to finish the year. We're in daily conversations with HUD on this and weekly workout program. We're hopeful and somewhat optimistic that HUD will make good on the shortfall. Right now, our assessment is that somewhere between a month and 2 months, and a range between $1 million and $3 million of shortfall, $3 million being the most conservative figure. And part of the analysis is when unemployment benefits would kick in, because that then counts as income and would return some of the tenant income back to the equation. That's probably our biggest systematic and agency-wide effort right now, is maintaining the health and viability of our voucher program. A quick update on the Envision process. Envision Casey proceeds. You see here the construction. Bosco 2 is nearly finished. Bosco 3 is at about 60%. You'll have a committee report shortly on the Red Oak townhomes that are going up right behind Bosco 3. So Envision Casey moves apace. Envision Napier Sudicum, our Connect Home program, is continuing at a much slower pace because of the limited way that we can educate residents on their laptops. And our Envision Center is open and and ready for business, but the challenge is our partners, United Way, the Financial Empowerment Center, and others are not ready to move in because of COVID. So we're doing a lot by teleconference. And last, just a quick report on the safety portion of the Safe and Affordable Housing mission of MDHA. Part of our RAD and Vision process has 5 safety components. The first is MDHA camera coverage, and we're very close to completing full camera coverage of all common areas, the open areas of our properties. Our task force, which continues a great relationship with Chief Anderson and our wonderful police force. Our MOU on walking patrols, which have been highly successful. Our community engagement teams provided separately and additionally by East Precinct and Midtown. And last, our private security firm, Allied, that provides internal security at our sites and particularly helpful in our towers. All this has resulted in a great drop in our violent crime and our overall crime posture since 2018. And we've pretty much stabilized at a level of very small amounts of violent crime and somewhat level of car break-ins and other vandalism. That pretty much wraps it all up, other than I want to thank Commissioner Coleman for her moving words, and I did my best. It's on our website to capture my emotions in this deeply challenging and, I think, as any citizen, worrisome and concerning time, but I hope and believe it will all come out of it better. And that is my report.
Thank you, Mr. Harbison. Are there questions, responses to the report? Ms. Commissioner Coleman.
I have some questions, and one of them has to do with your discussion about the community quarterback. And I remember from the video and the information from the East End, the group out of the unit in Atlanta, is this the same community quarterback notion, or is it a different one?
Commissioner, same one, exact same one. Based on a lot of work and an assessment, we've dedicated a full-time staff person to help with recruitment, and also with recruitment and retention of philanthropic donors. As you may recall, the Curb Victory Center, where we have the homeless veteran site that's now about 60% complete. Mr. Curb was a generous donor, as was others, and we didn't have a systematic way to cultivate that relationship other than me. And I was not getting to that task as often as it probably deserved. So now we have someone doing that full time, reaching out to other members of the community that would fit that role of community quarterback in a systematic way. And we just started this really about 2 weeks ago. So we're hopeful that that's.
So on one level, it sounds like a development position, and on another level, we're articulating it as an engagement, what I'm calling radical outreach position. So what is it?
Well, I think you captured it quite well. I would say yes. You've got to get someone that helps us reach out to the community. And again, from the presentation from Carol, that reach out to the community and serves as that convening, convening collaborator to bring in others and help bring the community aboard, and to the degree possible, bring resources. So we have 2 other philanthropic offers right now that's part of this position, reaching out to them, discussing with them the value of investing their charity dollars in us and how we can leverage those funds to help with homelessness. Or we have one that's interested in assisting the Oasis Center as an example. So that's part of this. And the other part is bluntly researching with Carol Nolan, how do you go out and recruit the right fit and the right organization and team for the community quarterback. So it's a combination of both.
So is this for Casey or something else, or is this for all of the projects?
We're focused on Casey first. Vision Napier Suticum and the others, they will come later, but right now it's Casey first.
Okay, then I have another question with regard to this kind of shortfall. The fact that the 800 families on vouchers are now paying $25 for rent, and the shortfall standing is, did these people get unemployment plus the supplement, or did they not?
Well, many will, but there's a delay between the moment you lose your job and your
Uh-huh.
employment benefits come in. So we're hopeful. We haven't seen a positive effect yet, but someone loses their job, say in March, and they were paying $350. They don't have that $350 anymore. They come in and we go through a recertification process. This is what Norman Deep's team does better than anybody in the country. They demonstrate they've lost their income, and then their rent drops to 25 for April and May and June while we're waiting on them to receive their unemployment benefits. Once they receive them, they come back. We go through the recertification process again. We establish their new benchmark rents, but you typically do not recover the lost rents of that previous period. And that's why it's difficult to estimate exactly how much we're short, because we believe there will be some that will return and be able to pay in the coming months. And if it happens in a large number, then we won't have a shortfall at all. If it happens in a very small number, that's where the worst case number comes in. It could be as high as 3 million. Did that answer your question?
So the recertification is quarterly?
Recertification is on income changes. And if there's no income change, it's an annual recertification.
Okay.
We certify on an annual basis or we renew the lease. It's a smoother process if there's no change in economic condition and income. But there's a recertification renewal process on an annual basis with the lease renewal. And then if there's an income change, the tenant is required to come in. And they always come in when they lose funds and they've lost a job. They are very good about coming in. And then we recertify and they go to minimum rent.
So Jim, for those that have gone to minimum rent, you said they come back or you look at it again at the end of June. And why June? Was that just set as a relook date?
I'm not sure what you mean. So the income recertifications, I'll put Norman on it, but they started happening in pretty good volumes late March, early April. And so it's just accumulation of it has now hit the HUD radar. We knew that there was going to be a potential for shortfall and in fact stopped issuing vouchers some time ago because of that. So we have the existing voucher inventory that we're sitting pat on now and not issuing new vouchers until we can stabilize the platform, either through reception of new income from HUD or from the fact that with unemployment benefits and other benefits kick in and these rents come back up. And Norman, if you're on, do you want to clean up anything in that response for me that I missed?
Supplemental payment, many of them are getting it, but that is excluded per HUD guidelines because it's a temporary income. So we can't count the $600.
You can't count that.
No.
Okay, that's what I thought.
What about the unemployment? Can you count that?
Yes, ma'am, that is annualized. We do count the unemployment benefits.
Other questions?
Yes, one more about the safety. You mentioned those 5 points, and you feel that as a result of them, there's been a decrease or drop in the crime activity in all of the properties since 2018, or what?
Well, there has been a decline in overall crime, but our crime is focused previously on Casey, Sudicum, Napier, and Cumberland View. Casey's improved dramatically, Sudicum, Napier slightly, and Cumberland View slightly. But we believe it is a result of this investment, yes. But to your point, it could be other reasons, but we can't think of anything else to add on to this other than additional community engagement and policing, cameras, and private security. Our towers have very little challenges on crime. They're relatively easily made safe because of access points in and out of the tower buildings. It's the family properties, especially old ones, that we have our greatest challenge with on crime.
All right. We have committee reports and 3 action items remaining. As we move to this part of the agenda, it occurs to me in our effort to continuously improve the flow I would like you to consider whether or not we should take committee reports at the earlier in the meeting and move the executive director's report down below that so as to give the executive director's report more of an open-ended time that would not be perceived as moving into committee time. Does that have any appeal? You might think about it, and while you're thinking about it, I will call on Commissioner Thaden, Chair, and Commissioner Ansari, Chair, for the committee reports.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bill. So we held a Joint Finance and Development Committee meeting on June 4th, and the first item on the agenda was the mid-year financial update. We are under budget based upon our budget to actual statement, and the financials look strong regardless of this tumultuous time, but that was through March, so we're going to have to revisit our financials at some point and see the consequences of all of the new funding that's coming in and all of the new expenses. We also reviewed the expected roadmap for development and the unrestricted income and expenses for that development to help us kind of understand our pathway forward for through, I believe it was 2021's development plans that we're hoping to do under Envision Casey and some other development projects. We agreed in that meeting that Aioli and I will meet with the finance department to discuss the presentation of financials, and I hope that we can make that even more transparent and easier to consume for both ourselves and the public at some point going forward. Next on the agenda, we just had an informational presentation on a public housing authority plan, which will come to us in a future meeting. We deferred to our next joint committee meeting the substantial amendment to the 2019 action plan, as well as our discussion on redevelopment districts. We made the decision during the meeting that our board retreat request document, our running list of the things we want to be covering as a board, will actually move out of the committee structure, and out of that, we won't be reviewing that in committees, even though we might be taking up items on the list in committees, but really review that in the board meeting rather than on the committee's agenda. Next, next we took on the Charlie Barn garage, and we recommended that the full board authorize the executive director to sign the document for construction financing of the project. This project was estimated to be around $14 million in total development costs, and it will yield 378 parking spaces in the Rolling Mill Hills larger development plan. And so with that, I will pause on the report out and move that we move that motion here for the entire board.
Thank you. That's a motion properly made. No second is required. Is there any discussion? Are you ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And you adopt. Next item.
The next item on our agenda that day was the Red Oak Townhomes. It was, so this project is roughly $16.5 million for townhomes, of which 25 of those would be affordable at or below 80% of the area median income. And as was referenced, this is a part of the Envision Casey plan. This project in particular is helping to take care of the need for larger bedrooms that are needed for existing public housing residents. And so with that, the committee unanimously recommended that we authorize the executive director to sign the construction and financing documents for this project. And so I would move that motion now.
Motion properly made. Is there any discussion? Questions? Are you ready to vote? Committee, you don't. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And you adopt. Committee recommendations, unless there's an objection from the board, a committee recommendation coming to the full board can be moved by the chair the committee and does not require a second. Subject to Saul Solomon's further review and approval.
So approved and reviewed.
Thank you. Good. That cheers me up. Third item.
All right, so there was no additional business at the June 4th meeting, but the Joint Finance and Development Committees came together this morning before this meeting. The first item on that agenda was to take up the review of the redevelopment districts, for which we had a very thorough discussion and excellent presentation by Joe Kane. We all collectively agreed that this is redevelopment districts and the deployment of TIF is something that we need to be very active on and use all of our brain power for to try to make sure that we are infusing as much equity and revitalization in the areas most needed in the city moving forward. So this is not a final discussion, it's the start of one. With no further time to presentation and discussion, we moved on to the substantial amendment to the 2019 action plan and the 2018 to 2023 con plan. These changes predominantly included making sure that we were addressing providing housing relief related to COVID for both homeless populations and for lower income renters and homeowners in Davidson County. And also the action plan amendments related to get additional resources or be able to get additional resources if needed on the street for tornado relief and reconstruction. And so with that, we unanimously move to approve those things and recommend the full board approval. And so with that, I make the motion now.
Again, motion made. And is there any discussion, concern? Thank you for a very good report. You ready to vote? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And you adopt. Anything further from the committees?
With that, we were adjourned, and I'm amazed I can even remember what we did this week.
and which day you did it on, which I find increasingly it is Tuesday, isn't it? Okay. All right. Still, with your approval, we'll move on to item number 7, which is a review of the spreadsheet, which is done for those people who haven't been to their optometrist for a while, is to remind you that you should probably get back to your optometrist because it's not going to get any better. But that said, here it is. It's the complete, though teeny, report of all of the action items that we found at the time of our board meeting with, and I thank Jim and the staff for not just listing them, but tracking them and moving them so that we can keep together about where we are. I think it has the additional advantage from my perspective of giving us a sense of what the staff, with some input from us, are foreseeing as the major topics, or at least specific topics to be addressed in meetings ahead. And that appears obviously in that data review column. There is flexibility within this, and this is a place where not necessarily required today, but if you have a concern, a thought, or an addition, we have the ability to do that and to look forward in a way that we didn't, I think, before necessarily, as to not just what's ahead, but what should be ahead on those things we've talked about. So I have, in that category, 3 quick thoughts for the board. 1, on the redevelopment districts. My impression and belief is that the committee's got, as the chair said, a strong start, and that conversation will pick back up. I think Joe Kane still had, well, I know we had 17 slides. There may have been some more behind that, but I know there were at least 17 more ahead, and obviously some other things to react to in terms of what we said. So I believe the committees are anticipating that will be back before the committees next month, the next committee meeting. Is that, to the chairs, does that sound right to you? Okay. Then I think we might consider a full board discussion and think about whether it is then the next month, August, or is it sometime else? We don't have to decide today, but I think that's just the kind of thing that we might begin to think about where do we want to place that on the board calendar as a board. And then I will add two other items which are not here, were discussed at the retreat and now have come up more recently. And one is crime, just raised, just talked about, but a broader conversation with the full board about crime and safety, which is where we are and how we are. And education happen to be the two most important things in any city's life, and I think we've had a longstanding engagement in that area, and at some point during this year, a conversation about education, both what we're doing in our expanding education support and also specifically what's occurred. Those are just two items that from the chair's perspective don't pop up on this list, but could, based on what I've heard you say and my recollections of the retreat, could become additions to this agenda for the months ahead. But if there are other things that need to be there, this isn't the complete agenda, but these are the things that the board specifically thought needed to be on our plate for this year. And so they are. And my hope is meeting your needs. Any thoughts or, I'm sorry.
So again, I think the executive staff were putting it together, and even in the nice, simple memo format, it's very clear what's been completed and what we're still working on. And so I think I'd like to recommend that in addition to our focus on crime and our focus on education, I think there's two things that I might have thought have, over my term here, seen more transparency on. One is diversity in hiring, and especially as it relates to kind of sort of what is happening at the executive staff, at the executive level. And the second thing is really around MWBE participation, NWBE participation in all the work that we're doing. I mean, our plan is to spend, hopefully if we do it right, is to raise and spend billions of dollars. And I think the answer that we kind of get every time is that, well, we put it in every RFP, and, if the guys kind of do it, they kind of do it. If they don't, there's been no transparency about our performance in MWBE. There's been no, we have awarded X millions of dollars of contracts, and here's the amount of contracts that were awarded either directly by MDHA, which I think is a strong indicator of performance. And then the second one is, here's what we have kind of sort of verified or audited through our third-party contractors who are doing the work. So I would like to see us, especially as you talk about building wealth and creating more economic equity, direct participation in contract opportunities. We have the ability to be, a leader in kind of sort of transparency on that. And so far, I really haven't seen much that you can point that we can say, okay, let's look at this piece of paper and say, here's how we're doing against what benchmark. At least I haven't seen it yet.
Thank you. That's something, looking at all of you now, is that a priority?
This is Paulette. It is an extremely important priority. And my recollection of the response agency when the is raised is that exceeding our goals and targets. And related to this is I would like to have us deal with economic empowerment of the residents. My understanding of public housing, and I know we've moved from that model, was that it was intended as a springboard, very often, particularly at the beginning, for and served as forward to the middle class. And I know in some instances it has for our residents, but I've been troubled by the fact that there are multi-generations of residents who are still in public housing. And I was completely floored when and I may have this wrong, that there were some rents that were over $1,000 because the the incomes of the residents had been increased. So that's just something I'd like for us to explore.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think rather than us, the executive director would like to respond. I guess what I'm wondering first is this a discussion we should have now, or is this? My thought was that we would schedule it, and in fact, my thought was we would schedule it together, right this moment, which is not. I think diversity in hiring could be added to July. MWBE August. DB rather, and economic empowerment September. Is that all right? It has a flow. If there's any flow from one, there's some connected in our thinking around these subjects, and I think keeping it on the agenda, the issue in front of us, that gives us 3 months, and it could be, again, anything that we feel needs to be a standing agenda item for a report. That's not unheard of. But that's, I think in this case, if you're comfortable, that's how we'll schedule it. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Jim, but I just wanted to get it into our thinking and our schedule. All right. Okay. You're muted.
Will there be a reporting on minority business activity at the August meeting, how we're doing? I know for nonprofit housing developers doing the work, they have to report that to the department, and I assume that's collected, that data's collected and it's somewhere.
I think the answer here is it can be already in August.
The federal government every month on DBE, and our numbers are better than most in the country and are the best in Metro. And I can put the slide up now if you like, but if you recall, we report on this at the board retreat, and we'll have to do it again. So some we track all the time. And I think pretty aggressive, but we're always open to change and make it better.
And then on the development side, the envision development side of things, that line of business, is information tracked on that side?
Yeah, we require to report on every activity we do, from contracting for $25,000 for toilet paper to, 100 to whatever, the entire enterprise. Yeah.
Okay.
And similarly, I think there is from the committees a great desire for us to stay focused at the committee level for now on the medium and long-term needs, goals, and wishes within both Casey and the larger project. I say that not because the chairs have forgotten, just so that the chairs know I haven't forgotten. And when you're ready, I think that would be something to surface then more fully to the board for further discussion as well. When you're prepared, that was a concern that was a focus of the retreat, and I know from our discussions literally every month, but particularly Commissioner Ansari's comments at our last meeting, two finance meetings ago, that we need to keep that front of mind, and that the committees are doing that.
So my understanding related to that is that we were waiting for MDHA to have prepared materials for us to lead us in that conversation. Do we have an estimate at this point when those materials will be ready? We can take this up as efficiently as possible.
I don't know. I think that, frankly, if with your approval, that's a conversation that I'd like to have the chairs and the staff, the executive director in particular, are going to be talking very soon, not just about the longer term, but to make it easier for you as chairs to be fully informed and ready when the meeting opens. And I think, with your permission, I'd like to defer that conversation to you and them. And if the response does not meet the committee's needs, then I know I would like to, and I think the rest of the board would like to know as well. But I'm confident that you all will find it a way to schedule this into the work of the committees and be comfortable that you have what you need. Because you always do when you when you insist.
Yeah.
So are you comfortable? Okay.
Yeah. Could I just make one more point?
Sure.
It's so hard to keep my head wrapped around everything that I feel it needs to be wrapped around with what this agency does. And I know there's probably frustration when you have to tell me again something that I've asked in previous months or time periods, but I believe it's important for this governing body to have an understanding of the population in terms of household size or demographics. I know there's some information that can't be released, but I would like to know, for example, out of all the current public housing residents, what percentage are over the age of 65? What percentage, are households with children under the age of 18? I don't really have a good understanding of, if I could get a picture in my head, who we are serving, so to speak, that live in those units, those homes.
Okay. Reasonable request. I think the agency has it and can share it, and will do so, and we can discuss it further if any member of the MDHA board wants to do so at the next meeting. Anything else?
I just wanted to give a compliment. I thought that the presentation to Metro Council that you all prepared was really well done. I mean, we are such a complicated organization, and I think that you guys really pulled out and highlighted the things that were most necessary. And included in that was the diversity of business enterprises. So thank you for whoever did all of the work to do this. I think it's the right messages that we need to be sending to council, and it's great.
It's very good.
I got a lot out of it as well.
Team effort. Everybody was involved, but thank you.
Well, on that happy and positive note, is there any additional business to come before the board at this time? Thank you all very much. And Commissioner Coleman, thank you for speaking to our hearts and sharing your heart with us and making sure we were focused on what's important today, as we will be in the days ahead. That being the case, there being no further business to come before the board, without objection, we stand adjourned.
Thank you.